Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are now located across the street from Agnes College, and tonight's event is actually co-sponsored by the Office of Spiritual and Religious Life at Agnes College. So we normally get to gather physically in our space, and man, we would love to be physically gathered together tonight. But this is a real treat because Terry Tempest Williams does not live anywhere near us, and so in some ways we are getting to enjoy different kinds of programming than we otherwise might because of our virtual events. So I certainly think this is one such example. When we heard that Terry had a new book coming out that was at the sort of the switch into 2020, and we didn't know what the year was going to bring at all. But it's turned out that Erosion has been a book that has been meaningful on multiple levels to many, many people. And it's really been a book for this moment, while also being timeless, I think. So I wanted to bring Charis co-founder Linda Bryant here. Many of you who are watching at home know Linda very well, but Linda is someone who introduced me to Terry Tempest Williams' work, and so I knew that this would be a really special opportunity. I want to let folks who are watching at home know that I see you're already sort of shouting out in the chat where you're watching from and your excitement. Feel free to continue to do that. We love to know where you're viewing from. There's also a button, Ask a Question. That obviously is where you can put your questions. If you see a question that you would like to have answered that's very similar to something you might have asked, you can upvote that, and that way we'll make sure to get to as many questions as possible. If you also see this teal button at the bottom, it says Buy Erosion, Essays I'm Undoing from Charis Books and More. That will take you to the direct link to buy the book from Charis, and we really do appreciate your support during this time. It means a lot. So I'm going to introduce Linda first. So Linda Bryant is, as I said, the co-founder of Charis Books and of Charis Circle. Linda is a mother and a grandmother. She found her life's work when, along with Barbara Borgman, she opened Charis in 1974. Linda is a graduate of the Candler School of Theology and a member of the Kirkwood United Church of Christ. She is many, many, many more things and has done many, many more things, but that's the very short thing. So welcome, Linda. And we're here tonight to celebrate with Terry Tempest Williams. Terry is an American writer and environmental activist, known for her lyrical prose with a spiritual depth and political edge. Her books include Refuge, An Unnatural History of Family and Place, Finding Beauty in a Broken World, When Women Were Birds, The Hour of Land, and most recently, the book we're celebrating tonight, Erosion, Essays of Undoing. Her work has been translated worldwide. She is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters and is currently writer-in-residence at the Harvard Divinity School. She and her husband, Brooke Williams, live in Castle Valley, Utah. So welcome, Terry. This is a really exciting time for so many of our Charis folks who have been asking me for years, can't you get Terry Tempest Williams to come to the store? So I'm glad that we get to make this happen virtually. I know that we're all in for a treat.
Thank you, ER and Linda. This is such a gift.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. I was saying to Wendy, my wife, earlier today, we meet these writers and we know them because we've read your work, and I've heard you talk about Erosion as a very raw book. And so I've read it more than once. So I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit. And so I just want to tell you a couple of things. One is that I have had the great pleasure of hand selling your books for many years. And
Thank you so much.
And I'm so grateful to the people like ER who have responded to them and have, that kind of bond that you have with people because you love the same books. Refuge.
Well, I'm so grateful to you. I just have to say, your bookstore is well known around the country. And when Maddie, who I've been working with at Picador, said that this invitation had come, we were both so excited. And I think to have a feminist bookstore that has been here for 46 years. It is such a testament to you, to Barbara, to your community. And I just feel so grateful for all the ways that you have supported women's books, the ways in which you have supported my books. And I'm thrilled to be in the hot spot of America right now. And I don't mean with the pandemic, but politically.
Right.
And we're all supporting, hopefully, the 2 Democratic senators. And it's
Indeed.
just an honor to be here and
Indeed.
to thank you.
One other just little thing I wanted to tell you as a kind of personal sharing is that when Unspoken Hunger came out and I read it, one of the stories in it, The Village Watchman, was a story that really touched me about your uncle. And I sent it to my brother, who was living in a great deal of pain. And he fell out of a tree when he was 13, broke his back. He was paraplegic. He became a drug addict at 15. He had a really very difficult life. But I loved that story, and I wanted him to read it. And your current book tells the story of your brother's suicide. And my brother committed suicide. And
So sorry.
when he died, he was in Texas, and of course I was at the funeral and all that, but I came back home and I wanted to do something with my community to remember him. And one of the things I did was to gather my friends together and read them that story.
Oh, thank you. That means so much, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I think to lose a loved one, a death by suicide, it's an avalanche of questions that bury you, that can never be answered. So I'm so sorry that we share that.
Right, right.
But I also honor. I think suicide is so complicated. I talk about a book that saved my life was James Hillman's book, Suicide in the Soul. I read it years ago, and I can't count how many times I have reread it. And Dan, my brother, who hung himself, read it. And, one of the things that I've always held on to was that every death on some level is a suicide. In other words, there is a time. And Dan and I had talked about, he died July 27th, 2018. And I guess it was April, he called and told me what he was going to do. And we discussed it. The last thing he said to me, Linda, was call if need be, knock if need be, and I never did. And it haunts me to this day. I mean, we find our own peace.
Right.
And I think part of the peace, which I talk about in Erosion, is a commitment that Hank and I had made to see him through the cremation, which in Mormon culture is taboo, less so now. But the beautiful man who was Mormon, Mr. Rabe, who allowed us to witness that process of 6 hours and the profound transformation, literally and metaphorically, of what we witnessed, was a real healing, I think, for Hank and I, as well as, I hope, Dan and our family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to be able to share that story of preparing his body for cremation, for sitting with his body at it as it burned. And when those doors were opened of the retort, and to see, as Mr. Rabe was rearranging the bones, even flesh appearing as white prayer flags. It was something we could never have imagined. And then waiting again and being able to be in that state of meditation of his life and our love. And then when it opened for the last time, to see his physical presence gone. And to watch Mr. Rabe, almost like a Zen master, move the bones, separate the bones onto trays and take them into a room. And I will always be grateful that he left and allowed us to experience that last radiating heat from our brother's life. And I will never forget looking at those bones and saying to my brother Hank, "What are you thinking?" And he just looked at me and said, "Probably the same thing you're thinking. Are they rabbit bones? Are they raven bones? Are they coyote?" Because as siblings, we had spent so much of our childhood in the desert, looking for bones. In all of our homes are bones. I just sent Bill McKibben a scapula because he's having scapula surgery, and I think that in the midst of that most sacred moment of saying goodbye to loved ones, especially siblings, to find the humor, the joy, the recognition of what has made you whole, even in the unraveling. I'm so grateful. And to weigh his ashes, after the grinding of the bones, and realize when we weighed them with Mr. Rabe, they were the exact weight of his birth, 8 pounds, 4 ounces, the same weight of a gallon of water in the desert. Thank you for sharing your brother and allowing me to share mine. We're bound by that, Linda.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Terry, in your book, you speak a lot about the power of story. And that's a very powerful story that you share with us about your brother, but you share a lot of other powerful stories in this book too. And I started listing them in my notes, all the different stories that you were telling, but I couldn't list them all because there were so many. There were stories of your activism, which I think are important stories. Stories of Willie Gray Eyes, which is such an important story. That whole story about the Council of Pronghorn and the pause, the necessity of the pause. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about community, because you talked about it in the story on the river when the man was thinking about jumping into the water and the community held him back. And one of your phrase there is reflecting on how important community is to our survival and the amount of work it takes to support each other and what we lose if we don't. And because Charis is so much about community, and that community used to be within 4 walls, and now that community is all over the world. I would love for you to talk a little bit. As you give your different talks in different places, you talk about the community around politics and prose, the community at the Harvard Divinity School, so there's a lot that you share with us about community.
I'm very mindful as we are in this pandemic and about to enter a really dark period. We're there. COVID is burning through the American West, especially affecting Indigenous communities, and we're losing people we love. I think when the pandemic started, we thought it was a pause, and now it feels like a place. And I don't think we could survive if we didn't have our individual and collective communities. Because what I'm experiencing is, there are days where I think, I don't know if I can get up. I don't know if you feel that, but, just the despair is so deep in me when I'm watching what we're losing, whether it's friends, family members. My brother had COVID. Luckily, he survived. He lived with us for 3 months, healing afterwards in the spring. In those moments of despair, I'm aware of the limits of my own imagination. But imagination shared create collaboration. And I'm deeply aware that as a writer, I'm only interested in collaboration right now. I don't want to work alone. I want to work with other artists or writers or photographers. Even this moment is a collaborative moment. And I think in those moments of collaboration, community is created. And I believe so strongly that in community, anything is possible. And, I no longer am active in the Mormon church, but it's my roots. It's my family. And I think that's the one thing I've really held on to, is Mormon people have a deep sense of community and a community rooted in place. And I'm grateful for that. I think storytelling creates community. We tell a story and then we become accountable for that knowledge, which is shared. That knowledge builds community, and it's a shorthand. I remember my uncle. We do not see eye to eye. He is, how to even say it? He thinks Donald Trump is one of the most important presidents we've ever had, alongside Washington and Lincoln. There's not a lot we have in common politically. I will never forget when he ran for, state senator in Utah. He wanted the endorsement of the Sierra Club. He's a great hunter. He loves the outdoors. But I thought, I doubt that. But we were all there to support him. He was asked what his views on the environment were and how those views mattered to the state of Utah. I was on pins and needles thinking, what's he going to say? And he said this: "My name is Richard Tempest, and I belong to the clan of one-breasted women." And he sat down. And at that time, the Salt Lake community understood what that meant, because they had read Refuge, whether they agreed with it or not, that we belonged to a clan of one-breasted women. 9 women in our family all had mastectomies, 7 were dead, including his mother, my grandmother, and his sister-in-law, my mother. And my aunt had just gone through breast cancer. So for my uncle to say, I am a member of a clan of one-breasted women, what he was saying was, I understand how the health of the environment is the health of our community, even the bodies of the women we love. So I think that's what community is. And one of my struggles is, as a writer, I write to create community, but in that process of writing, you're pulled out of community. And so that's why it means so much to be part of your community at Charis at this moment in time.
Well, so Terry, you wrote this book around the time of the 2016 election and following, and the central story in it, surrounded by all those other important and wonderful stories, is the stories of Bears Ears. And just for those folks who have not read your book yet, will you explain that to them?
Yes, Bears Ears, it's 2 I'm drawing it with my finger. It kind of is like my glasses. That's what bear looks like up here, which I didn't realize, but then I noticed. There are two mesas that are sandstone covered with pinyon and juniper that rise out of a place called Cedar Mesa in the southeast corner of Utah, very near the Four Corners region of the American Southwest. These geographic features are sacred to the Diné, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Mountain Ute, and Ouray nations. This is where the bones of their ancestors are buried. This is where, on any given day when the wind blows through these canyons that rise upward like praying hands, they hear the songs of their ancestors. It is also where their ceremonies are performed, where they make prayers, where their medicines are called. They have asked for sacred land protection. In 2016, Barack Obama, our president then, through the 1906 Antiquities Act and presidential proclamation, established Bears Ears National Monument, protecting 1.3 million acres of land. It was a historic moment. It was a handshake across history. It was a co-management of the monuments where traditional knowledge could be woven with science, Western science. Less than a year later, President Donald Trump gutted Bears Ears National Monument by 85%, opening it up for oil and gas development. For this president, he did not see sacred land protection. He did not even see or hear the will of 5 Native nations, but he was real estate. As a white conservationist in the state of Utah, I've lived there all my life, I learned what it meant to be an ally. I learned what it meant to follow true, powerful spiritual leaders, people like Willie Grayeyes, who now is a county commissioner in San Juan County. Spiritual leaders like Jonah Yellowman, who is the spiritual advisor for Bears Ears and remains so. What I want to share, which I spoke to you privately before in the green room, was that I would love to invite this community that joins us, and I know some of you, Carl Little from Maine, another community, is to join with us in prayer for Jonah. He was just diagnosed, he was just tested positive. I can't even talk about it. He just tested positive this week and he's now in the ICU in Tuba City. What he asked of us as his wider community was to pray. And this is a man who understands the power of prayer and the reach of ceremony in community. So I would love to just hold a moment of silence for Jonah Yellowman. Thank you. I would love to read just a passage in honor of Jonah, because I think in each of our communities, we have these leaders. And Jonah is in his late 60s. He has a beautiful family. He lost his son to COVID. He has a humor that is full of wit. After my brother Dan died, we were on a bus together showing some people Bears Ears and the Colorado Plateau. I was sitting next to him. He took my hand and he said, "Terry, you're sad. It's not good for the community for you to be sad." And a week and a half later at dawn, I was outside. In the desert, you get up early. And Jonah appeared. And he said, I want to do ceremony for you. This is the kind of man he is. And what I loved about Jonah is, and love about him still, is that he kept saying, we do not want to protect bears' ears for our people. We want to protect bears' ears for all people. And this is what he said. Bears' ears is a sacred place for us, Jonah reiterated. Now it is threatened. We have to go deeper. And I think if anything that we take home away from our conversation, I would love for our listeners and Georgians to think about that. How do we go deeper, each in our own lives, each in our own way, with the gifts that are ours? That's what I continue to learn from Jonah Yellowman. So I'm reading now. I keep thinking about what Jonah might mean to go deeper, and how this might set us on a very different course as a people rooted in a place called Utah. And for that matter, all of us who live in America. Jonah has consistently said we are not just protecting bears' ears for our people, but all people. I'm tired of being told I'm on the far side of left-leaning politics. I'm an environmental extremist, an eco-terrorist, an activist. I'm tired of my own anger, which is really triggered and accessed by a Trump tweet or another act of aggression laid out by the Department of Interior, such as opening up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil drilling just because they can. I don't want to live in a binary world of either or, rural or urban, politically correct or incorrect, or most damaging of all, segregated into a world of black or brown or white. We've all been diminished by this ongoing fight over wildlands in Utah. And there is racism, environmental racism. And in the case of bears' ears, the people I know and love on both sides of this issue, those who are in favor of the monument and those who are not, when we sit down and actually break bread together, what we can all agree on is that what we love and share is a future of health for all. The sweet smell of sage brings us back home. We need to find a common language alongside what binds us together than what tears us apart. We need to have the hard conversations between neighbors and family and really listen to one another. Perhaps Jonah Yellowman's call to go deeper is a call to acknowledge the power that resides in the earth itself, the organic intelligence inherent in deserts and forests, in rivers and oceans, and in all manner of species beyond our own. Bears' ears is a place of power. Anyone who has walked this mysterious landscape of buttes and mesas and experienced the embrace of red rock canyons animated by the handprints of the ancient ones can feel this power. Utah's red rock wilderness, as vulnerable as it is now, will survive us with or without presidential proclamations, but we may not survive without it. The last thing I would say is I truly believe that with our President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, I think very early, maybe even on day one, they will reinstate Bears Ears National Monument to its rightful place.
May it be so. May it be so. Thank you, Terry. That was beautiful. And before we began, I was wondering, I was trying to remember where it was in the book that it was, we need to go deeper. So you picked up a perfect thing to honor your friend, who is our friend now too.
And I believe that these prayers will heal him as he has healed so many of us. So thank you. Thank you for this gift.
Thank you. Thank you. I am a little disconcerted, Terry, because you are frozen. And
oh, am I?
You are frozen, and I can't seem to. ER wrote me a little note saying he was going to try to reconnect you, but I couldn't answer it because I'm on my iPad and it won't let me write anything. So I'm not writing anything.
But can people hear me? If they can hear, we might just be able, to just go by sound.
Okay.
My face isn't so important.
ER did reconnect you, and we can see you now. I could see you all along, but I couldn't. But you were frozen, so it was just like I was looking at a picture of you. And now I can't see you at all, but I'm sure that's because ER is reconnecting you, and it's all going to be better in just a minute. So I want to, early in the book, I love how you frame the book. Hello, Terry, we can see you now. That you begin with this, the erosion of home, and then end with the liturgy of home, and that is very powerful. And of course, you were writing it. You have the erosion of democracy, which seems very pertinent to this moment as well. And yet you have the phrase, we need not lose hope. We just need to locate where it dwells. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and just wondering, you just said our hope is that Bears Ears will be restored, and National Staircase as well, I hope. So I'm just, it's like locating hope right now in this pandemic. We are all needing evidences of hope. The church where I belong, we did Lenten devotionals every day that came to people in the email, and we got to the end of the Lenten devotionals, and I was like, we can't stop sending people everyday emails. We have to have something. And so we named those emails Evidences of Hope, and different people in the congregation just wrote these beautiful things that were just tiny little evidences of hope. So, so I'd love to hear you talk about that, locating hope, where hope dwells for you in this moment in your life.
It's such an important question, and I love what you shared with us about evidences of hope. I'm going to be honest with you, Linda. Hope is not a word that I use very often, because prior to this pandemic, I have always felt that hope was tied to our desires. And maybe that's my own history. When my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, I hoped. And watching what's happening to the planet, I hoped and hoped and hoped. And I transferred my vocabulary from hope to faith, thinking of my great-grandmother, who was born in Mexico, the late Lee Romney. Yes, we're related to Mitt Romney through polygamy and our families. My great-grandmother, whom I knew and loved, she always said, Terry, faith without hope, faith without action is dead. Faith without action is dead. And so I've always felt that I have faith. I have tremendous faith. I have faith in the action of prayer. I have faith in the action of activism. I have faith in each of us identifying our gifts and giving them up in the name of community as offerings. But I've changed. I'm embracing hope in a new way. And it's because of something I read, believe it or not, John Freeman's Dictionary of the Undoing. He talks about hope as a force field. That I can understand. We just created a force field for Jonah of our prayers and love. And I do believe in vibrations. I believe in energy. We see it in the earth. Right now I'm just looking outside. It's the last light of day, and the sun is shining on Castleton Tower, which is a 400-foot stone monolith, a real monolith in Utah. And the scientists, I write about it in the last chapter of the paperback edition of erosion, Jeff Moore and his graduate students from the University of Utah have been studying the resonance of stone. What does stone take in? And they put a seismometer at the base of Castleton Tower. Then they put it at the top of Castleton Tower. And when they put on their headphones, what they heard surprised them. They heard a pulse, a living pulse. It's what Native people have always known. It's what those of us living in this small desert hamlet have intuited. It's what science now has confirmed. Even stone has a pulse. What they heard were the gurgling of magma. They could identify the waves of the Pacific Ocean, the disturbance of a helicopter, the vibration of human speech. I find that astonishing. That gives me hope that even stone has a force field that we can attune with, that we can resonate with, even the scientific term, the resonance of stone.
Yes, yes. Such a powerful thing.
So that's where hope dwells for me.
Yeah.
Hope dwells for me. I know where to find my strength, and that is in the land itself, in relationship with the land, in relationship with each other. Again, to riff, off of your theme, in the relationship of community. And I have to tell you, as an outsider from Georgia, watching Georgia with Stacey Abrams, with this election, with the solidarity that is being generated. It's an energy, it's a force field. It is where hope dwells right now in the state of Georgia. So I'm so grateful.
Yes.
For what is vibrating out of where you are.
Yes, yes. So, Terry, somebody just put in the chat, and everything we're learning about the lives of trees.
Isn't that true, how they communicate to each other? Again, these living, breathing souls, right?
So I'm wondering if you would like to read about the Mariposa Grove. I was going to have you sort of end with that because it's there as a tribute to activism, a deep listening, a spiritual healing. But maybe this is a good time for it. If you would.
I so appreciate that you asked me to read this. I've not read this. So Sue Beatty, a lead biologist at Yosemite National Park, now retired, offers an example. And the examples that I'm talking about are, what are the qualities that we most need in this epoch of the Anthropocene? Sue Beatty and I met in 2016 inside the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite National Park, where she told me this story. To remember why she does her job 2 or 3 times a week, Sue would walk through the Mariposa Grove, where the giant sequoias are known to be between 2,000 and 3,000 years old. She would imagine what they have lived through and witnessed. But one day, when she was walking through her normal pattern of thought was disrupted. I imagined the big trees speaking to her. We are suffering. We are dying. Can you hear us? We are suffering. We are dying. Can you hear us? What she saw in the grove were roots trampled and soil erosion in the extreme. She looked up and saw how the giant sequoias were continuing to grow larger in spite of the road being only a foot away. People were parking their cars on the roots of the big trees. She noticed how the surface water was being diverted through roadside ditches away from the trees, and she wondered what actions she and her team could take to alleviate their suffering. Sue would tell you I am giving her too much credit, that this was a collaborative effort with her project management team. Perhaps that is true, but I would tell you she is a modest human being whose sensitivity to the sequoias made all the difference. Sue Beatty had a vision of restoration. Quote, as a group, We discussed what was needed to start planning for a restoration of the grove, she said. I proposed, along with Kimball Cock, the project manager, that we needed a comprehension analysis of the Mariposa Grove, a complete inventory of the giant sequoias, wetland mapping, a hydrologic look at water diversions of roadside ditches, wildlife surveys of rare species, an anthropological study, and an evaluation of how visitors were currently using and impacting the grove, which is what they did. They gathered this information on the sequoia's behalf, which helped provide the basis for a planning effort to improve the habitat for the big trees, in the belief that it would also improve the visitor's experience. What was wrong? Since the Mariposa Grove's protection by President Abraham Lincoln as part of the Yosemite Land Grant Act of 1864, millions of people's feet had been tamping down the sequoia's roots. Roads and buildings had been encroaching on their root systems. The giant sequoias, the big trees, were in fact suffocating. They could not breathe. The xylem and phloem were not flowing properly. Neither were the natural waterways and wetlands. What did Sue and her team recommend? Removing all the pavement in the grove so that the fragile root systems could heal. Restoring some semblance of stillness to the chaos of park visitations. Roads would be realigned. A different vision would be sought. The Mariposa Grove would no longer be a place of entertainment and recreation, but a place of reverence and restoration. No more trams, no more vans, no more cars, but rather seekers who could hold the quiet with the sequoias. The planning team took this data and the recommendations to the superintendent and management team of Yosemite National Park. They listened. Together, they discussed with the leadership within the National Park Service the most ambitious restoration project in the history of Yosemite. The proposal for the restoration of the Mariposa Grove was approved. $40 million was raised on behalf of the trees' well-being, much of it from small citizen donations. And for 3 years, the big trees rested. The tram stopped, the parking lot was removed, and relocated 2 miles away. Visitors were redirected to other places in the park, and miles of asphalt was removed. Roads were taken out that impinged on the trees' root systems and replaced with gentle walking paths and trails designed for the ecological health and well-being of the trees. Wetlands and waterways were restored. All commercial activities from the gift shop to tram rides ceased and we were located elsewhere in the park. Sue Beatty and her team listened to the land and responded not only from what they knew as scientists, but from what they imagined as individuals who cared. I like to think Sue Beatty heard, "We are suffering, we are dying, can you hear us?" Sue Beatty heard them. In the summer of 2018, the public was invited back to pay their respects to the ancient ones. Peace and stillness have been restored. Now, when you walk into the Mariposa Grove and stand before these great beings, you are met with an invitation. Can you hear the trees speaking?
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for asking.
That's such a beautiful, beautiful passage. And I'm thinking of the title of your book is Erosion. There's so, and yet that moment was not an erosion. That moment was a stopping, an excavation, an action, a doing to reverse things. And I think that's kind of where we are right now.
It's so beautifully said. And I think this is what the Liturgy of Home can be. And it's radical.
It is radical. It is radical because money wasn't, I mean, you speak of how much money was raised, but the question was what it was going to cost, not what it would cost to not have the park open. The question was what would it cost to do the work that we needed to do. not.
And what was the cost to the trees?
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And how we might begin to hear.
Mm-hmm. And I love, again, you've given us a theme tonight. You know, the community of trees, let their needs be known. And a community of scientists responded. And the larger community of the National Park Service responded. And the larger still community of those citizens who love the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite responded. As Abraham Lincoln responded, you know, in 1864, in the worst, following the worst year of the Civil War, he thought, maybe these trees, these big trees that I will never know or see, could unite a divided country. And I feel trees are uniting us again to a community both human and wild.
Terry, it's a few weeks ago, we had a program at Charis with one of our favorite young writers, Alexis Pauline Gumbs. She's a brilliant Black feminist, love evangelist is what she calls herself.
I love that.
Brilliant writer. But she has, her most recent book is Undrowned, and it is about our oneness with the marine mammals. And
I'm writing this down and I will order it immediately. In fact, could I order it from you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's yes, we will see that you get it, Terry.
No, I want to support you, as we all do. So thank you.
It's a beautiful book, but when I then reread Erosion in preparation for this, I realized what a great companion Erosion is to Undrowned, because Erosion is really about our oneness with the land, that there is no separation. Right. Over and over, you tell us that there is no separation. So climate change, you speak, and I'm just going to read a little teeny piece of what you wrote, and would like to have you talk about this a little bit. Our denial is our collusion. Our silence is our death. The climate is changing. We have a right and responsibility to protect each other. Resistance and insistence before the law. We are slowly dying. We are ignoring the evidence. Awareness is our prayer. Beauty will prevail. Native people are showing us the way. It is time to heal these lands and each other by calling them what they are, sacred. So thank you for the beauty of that, but that beginning, our denial is our collusion.
I think we're seeing this in the erosion of our democracy. I think we're seeing this in the seditious acts of 100+ Republican Congress people who are saying that this was a stolen election, which is a lie. I think we're seeing this in not only a denial of climate change, but a refusal to understand it. And I think that our denial of science is a collusion of what is happening to the planet. And not just the planet, Earth, the only place we will ever know as home, but in planetary health, even our own bodies, even this virus right now that is bringing us to our knees. So it's all interrelated, interconnected. And the power of erosion for me is not just what is whittled and worn away through time, wind, and water, but it's the process by which we are returned to the essence of things. You know, when I I didn't see the Grand Canyon until I was in my 20s. My family just thought it was like everywhere else in Utah, you know. My father literally, like so many, said it's just a big hole in the ground. And too many people, mainly that. But when my husband Brooke took me there, he blindfolded me, which sounds odd, and walked me to the rim. And then when I took the blindfold off and looked into this massive hole in the ground, you know, of such extraordinary beauty, I said to Brooke, why didn't anyone tell me about this? And he goes, Terry, I think people know about the Grand Canyon, you know, but it wasn't so much what remained, but it was what had been removed, that it was that negative space that was so powerful. And I think that, you know, we are in a process of erosion right now. And I think that our erosion is our evolution. We are eroding and evolving at once. And that really was my mantra during the writing of this book. And in the same way that I feel like right now we are in this reckoning and an awakening, that we can hold these contradictory ideas together at once. On one hand, it's a reckoning. On the other hand, it's an awakening. How do we bring these two hands together in prayer? Eroding, evolving at once. Thank God. Yes. You know?
Now, that last thing that you just said, Terry, broke up, so I didn't hear what it was.
Thank Goddess. Instead of thank God.
Yes, yes. Now, another phrase that you use a lot, Terry, is beautiful, broken, beautiful. And just as I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, but as a little aside, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, whom I just mentioned, when she was quite young, maybe 19, and publishing some little poetry monograph kinds of things, she named her press Broken Beautiful Press.
You're kidding. Isn't that wonderful?
No, and that
what an amazing thing for a press.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, yes. So that phrase is very resonant for me. Alexis was in the same writers group with ER in high school.
Oh, wow.
And sitting in a little back room of Charis together with us. And
I would so like to meet her. I would so love to meet her.
Well, and you will meet her one day. I feel certain, and you can certainly find her all over the place on the internet. And
I've heard of her book. You know, it's when you hear something for 3 times, you think, okay, now. So I'm excited to read it.
Yes, yes. And it's sort of a meditative book, so it's not for me something I'm just picking up and reading right through. It's more of a sit with, breathe with, take it in kind of a book. But I'm thrilled that you will read it. That'll be great.
I look forward to it. I think that notion for me of broken and beauty is how finding beauty in a broken world is creating beauty in the world we find. And, you know, I think about Isa, the haiku, insects on a bough floating down river, still singing, you know? And that brings us, I think, to presence. I think that if we're present, we'll know what to do, even in this climate of uncertainty and unknowing.
So, Terry, each time that I've been listening to you on YouTube in preparation for this, and it's been a lovely thing to, I was working in my garden yesterday, planting tulips,
Are you serious? We've got snow outside. I'm so envious.
Oh, today was a warm and beautiful day, and it was a perfect day to plant yesterday. It rained last night. So, but I had my little earphones in listening to your lecture at Harvard Divinity School on the Liturgy of Home. And it was just such a lovely moment to be with you in that.
That means a lot to me. That was really one of the most stressful moments of my life. I was so terrified. And I had just broken my nose 2 weeks prior, so talk about being undone and having to show up. But I think it shaped that because what am I trying to say? I think it's this. I want to read this to you because I think it's where we are right now too. And I love David Orr. The plain fact is that the planet does not need more successful people, but it does desperately need more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of every kind. It needs people who live well in their places. It needs people of moral courage, willing to join the fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these qualities have little to do with success as we have defined it. So there was a certain resistance in that talk.
Resistance?
Yeah, and I think, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't find the word. An indignance. There was a certain indignant quality to that, of just, there's so much pressure in the world, especially in Ivy League schools, to be perfect, to be successful, to be thinking ahead, to be performative. Wherein in fact, I'd just fallen on my face crossing the street from the Center for the Study of World Religion, to the Divinity School. And there was something so hilarious about it. It was like, okay, flesh, blood, ambulance, concussion, let's just see what's real, And here we are at a divinity school and everyone's so busy and overworked that no one even has time to just breathe. So it really was a talk about, can we breathe together?
Right.
And I wanted to just share with you, I love you, we can just riff on these things. This was just a piece I wrote during the midst of the fires, 5 million acres of the American West burning this fall, as you know. But there was this moment, let me see if I can find it, because it has to do with where we are now. We cannot breathe. This is our mantra in America now. We cannot breathe because of the smoke. We cannot breathe because of a virus that has entered our homes. We cannot breathe because of police brutality and too many black bodies and brown bodies dead on the streets. We cannot breathe because we are holding our breath for the people and places we love. I was asked to write an obituary for the land, but I realize I am writing an obituary for us, for the life we have lost and never can return to. And within this burning of Western lands, our innocence and denial is in flames. The obituary will be short. The time came and these humans died from the old ways of being. Good riddance. It was time. Their cause of death was the terminal disease of solipsism, whereby humans put themselves at the center of the universe. It was only about them, and in so doing, they had been dead to the world that is alive. Last paragraph. To the power of these burning, illuminated Western lands that have shaped our character, inspired our souls, and restored our belief in what is beautiful and enduring, I will never write your obituary. Because even as you burn, you are throwing down seeds that will sprout and flower, trees will grow, and forests will rise again as living testaments to how one survives change. It's from a little piece called A Burning Testament. But I think we keep going back to these same strands, Linda, of denial and truth-telling, of unity, denial, grief, and love.
Yes. Do you want to read for us, Terry, the trying to look at where it's written down, but the piece that you read at Politics and Prose, that you read in that Harvard lecture, that you read, I've heard you read it 2 or 3 times, that is the boom piece.
Sure.
It's such an important part of this book, and every time I hear you read it, I know that it's very important to your heart.
It's a tough piece.
Brings it up in you.
Let me find it. You've gone right to the heart of things, my friend. What is beauty if not stillness? What is stillness if not sight? What is sight if not an awakening? What is an awakening if not now? The American landscape is under assault by an administration that cares only about themselves. Working behind closed doors, they are strategically undermining environmental protections that have been in place for decades. They are getting away with it, in practices of secrecy, in deeds of greed, in acts of violence that are causing pain. Like many, I have compartmentalized my state of mind in order to survive. Like most, I have also compartmentalized my state of Utah. It is a hidden violence that we all share. This is the fallout that has entered our bodies, nuclear bombs tested in the desert. Boom. These are uranium tailings left on the edges of our towns where children play. Boom. The war games played and nerve gas stored in the West Desert. Boom. These are the oil and gas lines, frac lines, from Vernal to Bonanza in the Uinta Basin. Boom. This is Aneth and Montezuma Creek, the oil patches on Indian lands. Boom. Gut bear's ears. Boom. Cut Grand Staircase Escalante in half. Boom. And every other wild place that is easier for me to defend than my own people and species. Boom. Huntington and Kennecott mines. Boom. The oil refineries that foul the air and blacken our lungs in Salt Lake City. Boom. And the latest scar on the landscape, the tar sands mine in the Book Cliffs, now closed, hidden simply by its remoteness. Boom. Add the Cisco Desert where trains stop to settle the radioactive waste they carry on to Blanding. Boom. More move the uranium tailings from Moab to Crescent Junction, then bury it still hot in the alkaline desert, out of sight, out of mind. Boom. See the traces of human indignities on the sands near Topaz Mountain, left by the Japanese internment camps. Boom. President Donald J. Trump can try to eviscerate Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante monuments with his pen and poisonous policies. He will stand tall with other white men who for generations have exhumed, looted, and profited from the graves of the ancient ones. They will tell you Bears Ears belongs to them. Boom. This is a story, a patronizing story, also a condescending one. I see politicians and frontier Mormons discounting the tribes once again, calling them, quote, Lamanites, unquote, the rebellious ones against God, dark-skinned and cursed. That is their story. Racism is a story. The Book of Mormon is a story. Boom. Perhaps our greatest trauma living in the state of Utah is the religiosity of the Mormon patriarchy that says, as I was told growing up, that we had no authority. Women, Indians, Black people, brown people, gay people, trans people. It was only those who were white and male who could hold the priesthood over us, telling us the way to heaven is through them. All my life, I was told I could not speak, that I had no voice, no power, except through my father or husband or bishop. And then there was the prophet. Boom. I refused to perpetuate this lie, this myth, this abuse called silence. If birds had a voice, so did I. Environmental racism is the outcome of bad stories, a byproduct of poverty. In Utah, yellow cake has dusted the lips of Navajo uranium workers for decades, who are now sick or dead. Boom. There is no running water in Westwater, a reservation town adjacent to Blanding. Local municipalities refuse to provide Navajo families with a basic right. Water. Boom. But we are not prejudiced. Boom. If you speak of these oversights, call them cruelties, we as Mormons are seen as having betrayed our roots and our people. These are my people. Boom. This is who I am. Boom. A white woman of privilege, born of the covenant. I am not on the outside, but inside. Boom. It is time to look in the mirror and reflect on the histories that are ours. We are being told a treacherous story that says an individual's right, our hallowed state's right, to destroy what is common to us all is fine. The land beneath our feet, the water we drink, the air we breathe, expendable. Our bodies and the body of the state of Utah are being violated. Our eyes are closed, our mouths are sealed. We refuse to see or say what we know to be true. Utah is a beautiful violence. Do we dare to see Utah for what it is, an elegant toxic landscape where the power of oppression rules by repression, our proving grounds of fear? What are we afraid of? Exposure. Boom. Our denial is our collusion. Our silence is our death. The climate is changing. We have a right and responsibility to protect each other. Resistance and insistence before the law. We are ignoring the evidence. Awareness is our prayer. Beauty will prevail. Native people are showing us the way. It is time to heal these lands and each other by calling them what they are, sacred. May a Congress of ravens greet us in ceremony. May we recognize our need of a collective blessing by earth. May we ask forgiveness for our wounding of land and spirit. And may our right relationship to life be restored as we work together toward a survival shared. A story is awakening. We are part of something so much larger than ourselves, an interconnected whole that stretches upward to the stars. Coyote in the desert is howling in the darkness, calling forth the pack, lifting up the moon.
And I want to say amen.
Thank you for inviting me to read that. It's a seminal piece because I think it brings together both the power of story, the destruction of one story, and the importance of many stories. Environmental racism and environmental degradation among them.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you. I don't know if there is some place where there are questions that I'm not seeing. ER, if there are questions, will you speak up? No questions. Okay. If people have questions, ER has put this in the chat. Go ahead and ask them. And if not, we're having a great time talking anyway.
Where do you find your hope located?
Well, I told you I was working in my garden. I don't have a vegetable garden really. I have flowers, lots of them in every season. And during this pandemic, I have found myself walking around my yard a lot, and letting that be my morning prayer. Just walking around, looking at things.
It's so beautiful.
I also have grandchildren, and
what are their ages?
Well, two of them are teenage boys. So at this very moment, that's not exactly the source of hope. That's the source of a lot of.
But they have you. They have you as a grandmother.
They do. But we have a 9-year-old granddaughter who is doing a lot of her virtual schooling with us.
Wow.
And
it's beautiful.
There's just a lovingness in her that is a great joy. But another thing, Terry, is that this whole theme of community, Wendy and I were listening last night to Rabbi Sharon Brous, who is in California and who we've never met, but we love her. And she was talking about loneliness and about the kinds of community that we need, that and that we're lonely without. And she said, she spoke of, you know, some kind of an intimate relationship, a very deep friendship, a sweetheart, a partner, whatever. But then she spoke about our friend circles, as VR was talking about in the green room a little bit about the friend circles,
Right.
and how important those are. And then she spoke of the community of purpose
I love that.
and how important it is to have people that we are working together with for a greater good. And so I find a great deal of hope that I have all three of those things.
That's
And
beautiful.
that community of purpose is very intertwined with the Charis community that's so intergenerational, so deeply committed to anti-racism, so engaged with so many different people in different ways. And then I have chosen also to be part of a UCC church that has those same kind of elements of anti-racism and spiritual connection and deep purpose in trying to create justice in the world. So, so I find hope in community.
I love that weaving together of nature, justice, and the sacred, you know, this tapestry that is really being created, especially during this time that I think is so, so powerful. You know, you talk about intimate relations, and I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean that we can't touch each other right now, you know? And it made me think about what does that word mean, touch, to be touched. And, you know, hearing you talk about your garden, to be touched by your garden, to be touched by beauty, to be touched by a community of purpose, to touch someone with a story, with a song, with a word, you know, even though we haven't been able to physically touch one another, I haven't been able to hug my father, you know, for almost a year. He's 88 years old, but we have been touching each other's hearts. You know, every day we have a phone call, sometimes twice. I called him just yesterday. He goes, "What's wrong?" I said, no, you can't believe this huge buck that's just out the window. I want you to imagine it with me. You know, and he goes, "Is it 5 points or 4?" And, you know, we touch each other in different ways. You know, in the way I was thinking, I have a friend who is blind, but her other senses are so sharpened. So I think we can't physically touch each other, but we can touch each other's hearts. We can be touched by the last light of day. You know, we can be touched by this moment that you and I are sharing. We've never met, and yet I feel this touching moment.
Yes.
So I think we're being asked to expand in ways we couldn't have imagined. That the reach of our influence, we thought it meant being on planes, you know, that was about service. It wasn't serving the planet. You know, I haven't been on a plane for almost a year. I have no desire to get on another plane for a very long time. And I've never felt more grounded or settled than to be home. And yet here we are in Utah and Georgia, speaking of things that matter to us. So I think we're reevaluating our choices. And when Arundhati Roy talked about the pandemic as being a portal, I think this has been one of the gifts amongst the terror.
Back to that broken and beautiful,
Right.
that how this is breaking us.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, it is breaking us open.
Yeah, exactly.
To that level of connection. And Charis has found that truth in the fact that we can only fit a certain number of people into the beautiful room where we have programs where we have that real personal connection and growing together and listening and all that. But we now have connections around the world that are tuned in to these kinds of conversations.
I was saying to my students, you know, there are these moments even in the grid, where it looks like the Brady Bunch, where I call it circling the square, where transcendence does occur. I remember in the spring, it was our last class, and I took, my laptop outside for them to see Castleton Tower, this sandstone formation called the Priest and Nuns and Adobe Mesa. And then we just sat down and outside, and everyone took their, laptops outside if they could. And they were students from all over the world, from the divinity school. And we listened to birdsong. It was the spring. We could hear the meadowlarks. We could hear the pinion jays. We could hear the sais phoebes. And all of a sudden, Linda, I heard, that's a blue jay. Or are there cardinals here in the desert? And all of a sudden it was like, what's that bird? And it was this bird from India. And all of the birds in all of these different places were responding to each other. And we sat there, 16 of us, outside all over the world, listening to international birdsong conversation. I mean, it was completely transcendent, and none of us wanted to leave, That could never happen.
Right.
Otherwise.
Right. We have been doing a 7:30 in the morning online prayer call from our little UCC church. This is just 10 minutes that different people lead. We just call into it. We don't do Zoom and see each other's faces, but I usually sit on my back porch. So I bring the birds.
Isn't that wonderful? I
have the eastern bluebirds in my backyard and the cardinal and you can, they're always chatting in the mornings, and especially at 7:30 in the morning. And so they're like, oh, that must be Linda.
I mean, we're hearing all these other creatures, Someone said to me, aren't you lonely? Because we're in a very remote place, which is why I think we've had technical difficulties, which I apologize for. But I said, are you kidding? It is so exciting here every day. The pinion jays are flying through. Today, coyote tracks were circling the house. We heard a mountain lion the other night. Tonight we're going to be able to see that conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn that look like the Star of Bethlehem. I mean, it's just, there's so much going on outside, I think, if we pay attention. And that's what this moment is allowing us.
Yes. Now I saw ER pop on for a minute. I'm wondering if it's almost time for us to close. If
that was an accident. I'm sorry, guys.
Are there any other questions from the audience? I would love to hear.
Terry, if there are not, and I don't want to presume that there aren't, but I am looking at what you wrote right after the election. And even though we are in a much more hopeful place now, politically, may it be so, looking forward to January 20th and all that. But I love the way that this piece ends, and it's fairly short, which is this moment, Erosion of Democracy. And it's still appropriate because we are still mourning. We are mourning what has happened in these 4 years and what is happening now in our land. But I love how you speak to us in this.
I would love to read this. For those of you who are joining us, this was written on the banks of the Colorado River, running red, on the morning after we knew that Hillary Clinton had lost. She had just given her concession speech, which now seems like an endangered species. And I went down to the river, and this is what I wrote in my journal. This moment, Erosion of Democracy, November 9th, 2016. It is morning. It is morning, and the river is before me. I am a writer without words who is struggling to find them. I am holding the balm of beauty, this river, this desert, so vulnerable, all of us. I'm trying to shape my despair into some form of action, but for now, I am standing on the cold edge of grief. We are staring at a belligerent rejection of change by our fellow Americans who believe they have voted for change. The seismic shock of a new political landscape is settling. For now, I do not feel like unity is what is called for. Resistance is our courage. Love will become us. The land holds us still. Let us pause and listen and gather our strength with grace and move forward like water in all its manifestations. Flat water, white water, rapids and eddies, and flood this country with an integrity of purpose and patience and persistence, capable of cracking stone. I am a writer without words who continues to believe in the vitality of the struggle. Let us hold each other close and be kind. Let us gather together and break bread. Let us trust that what is required of us next will become clear in time. What has been hidden is now exposed. This river, this morning, this moment, may we be brave enough to feel it deeply and then act.
That feels like a beautiful benediction, Terry.
Thank you so much for this time together, Linda, and with your community and ER, and I can't wait to visit you in person.
Well, we can't wait for that to happen, and I am just so, feeling that connection of the heart, and thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone, and ER, thank you. And I will call with my credit card and purchase Undrowned. So thank you.
Thank you. Well,
for that.
I do think that you and Alexis have a spiritual synergy for sure. So that makes me happy to think about.
And let's hope for brilliant elections.
Yes.
So we are with you and by your side. And thank you for your creation of community and extending it to all of us all over the world.
Thank you. To everyone who is at home, I hope you stay safe and well.